Hey everyone, welcome to Symbiotic. I'm Grim,
I'm Friendly Neighborhood Steve.
and today we're going to be talking about anxiety.
Alright, so a lot of you, I'm sure, are familiar with anxiety, especially if you're watching this. You're either in recovery or have mental health disorders, so you're well rehearsed in what anxiety feels like. If you didn't know, it goes back to our hunter-gatherer days before we had cities. It was our kind of like our gut feeling of, knowing that we were in danger. Therefore, we would be on the lookout. And so moving forward, anxiety these days is the same thing. It's your brain telling you that you're in danger, as if like a tiger is about to attack you, is that constant fear of like looking over your shoulder type of deal. But you don't understand why, because you're safe, and there are no tigers in Reno, Nevada, that I'm aware of. So, thankfully, yeah, for sure. Anyways, so a little bit about myself. I've dealt with anxiety my entire life, and I've had, and unfortunately, I wasn't fully diagnosed professionally until I was an adult, being that, my folks didn't really believe in it. So I, as a child, had to learn how to adapt. So by the time I was 16, I had learned how to put on a mask and basically fake it till I make it. Anytime I had to be in social situations or, was nervous talking to someone, I would put on my mask and just pretend that I was cool, calm, and collected. And eventually it just worked. And I put on this mask for just about everything. And then I was introduced to, alcohol and drugs, which made me a lot more calmer and more outgoing. So then I didn't quite need the mask anymore. Unfortunately, that led me into my addiction. But these days, I'm, sober, and I still have anxiety, like crazy. Just about every moment of every day, I'm anxious. I take medication and things like that to help, but the other 75% is, work I have to do. So, I'm gonna pass it over to Grim here, and he's gonna talk a little bit, and then, obviously, you know what we do. We go back and forth.
Pass the ball. All right. Anxiety. It's something I've struggled with most of my life as well. Arguably my whole life. And it's also, I can relate to Steve's story as well, in the sense that it's also one of the reasons why I got involved with alcohol and drug use. I looked at it a little bit more like it was a mask that I didn't have to use energy up to maintain. Like it gave me what my mask gave me without the cost that the mask demands of you, because it's exhausting. It's fucking exhausting, man. Like constantly trying to maintain this just social composure that neurotypicals have, or just somebody who doesn't struggle with anxiety. It's like running a marathon, but it's mental. I mean, it's physical too. Honestly.
Yeah,
Too.
for sure. I feel it in my shoulders, in my chest, in my back.
Oh yeah, if you've ever had a panic attack, you know exactly. You know well enough that it definitely affects you physically. I think my first panic attack, I thought I was having a heart attack.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, because I didn't know what it was. It was
for sure
horrible. I want to talk about some ways to get around anxiety. You can't always, especially if it's a diagnosis like mine, like I have social anxiety. It's an anxiety disorder, so it's it's not necessarily going to go away, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
I can do things and learn skills and like coping mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
to help mitigate that,
Right.
you know,
Right. Absolutely.
to help manage it, so to speak, right? I know this is going to sound super cliche, so forgive me, but it works, and that's box breathing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I use box breathing all the time, right? You see me over here. Yeah, don't talk to me. I'm managing. I'm managing my anxiety.
Yeah. Right. Right.
You know, for those of you who don't know what box breathing is, right? And you can adjust this however you need to, because the first couple times that you do it, you might get a little lightheaded because you're not used to the exercise. So you know you can shorten the time. You can cut out the. Well, I'll just go. Right. So basically, what you're gonna do is, starting off, I would start with 3 seconds. Right. So you inhale for 3 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, exhale for 3 seconds, hold for 3 seconds. Right. Box. So inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Right. Box breathing. So if you want to try it with me, we can do a little mock.
Yeah, you do yours, and I'll show them mine.
Fair enough. Well, that's good. And we can have more lures in the tackle box.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
So basically, you know, like I said, breathe, hold, breathe, hold. That's it. So. That's it. You just keep doing that. And what that does is it releases the tension in your body. It lowers your heart rate, and it brings your mind down to a more calm place. Right. Those are, and all of those things. Those are the opposite of the symptoms of anxiety.
Right.
You know, racing heart, tightening chest, tightening muscles, just mind that can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And that's why I love this exercise. That, and also one that a lot of people don't know is you have in your fingertips, you have a lot of nerves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Connected to your nervous system, right? And to help regulate your nervous system, as many of us know, repetitive, usually it's tapping of the feet,
Right.
or this, or clicking a pen, you know. But it's the same idea, except you're working with your nervous system, not against it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's literally all you're doing. That's all you have to do. Right? You can do that discreetly. You can do it not discreetly. It doesn't matter. But you're just literally tapping each of your fingertips. Typically you want to tap the end one twice, but that's hard for me. So that's all you got to do for that. See if it works. Try it out. If it doesn't, do what works for you.
So the one that I actually learned in rehab was so you take your hand, you take your finger, and you run your finger up and inhale, down to exhale, up to inhale, down to exhale, and you just continue until you get to the end, and then you go back. And you go back and forth.
I really like that, actually.
Until you're feeling better. And the reason that I like this one in particular is because of the touch sensation. That basically like takes my mind off of it, because like I enjoy the sensation, as weird as it may sound, but it pulls me out of the situation and like allows my brain to kind of clear out, and it puts me in a calmer state, so that's just my trick. Everybody who's watching this, you figure out what works best for you. Give these a couple a try, and if you find something better, please let us know. Like we're always trying to gain knowledge, and we're not medical professionals by no means. We just like to talk about recovery and mental health. We're firm believers that mental health matters, and we're advocates for it, as well as we're advocates for recovery. So, you know, please, if you have any ideas or anything like that, we'd love to hear from you. You know, so back to the topic. You know,
can I just say one thing?
Oh yeah, buddy, go for it.
I like your technique a lot because to me it takes the two things I just said and it puts them into one super easy technique, but it also adds that tactile.
Right.
That tactile thing. Because I just tried it a minute ago and that is extremely pleasant. Like,
yeah, as weird as it sounds, like it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Try it out.
So I'm gonna bring in a little splash of recovery into the topic. You know, tell me, Grim, what was one of the most anxious moments when you first got into recovery?
Right before you dragged me into that first day,
or if it's that one, man. I mean, your first day of sobriety up until today.
First day of sobriety. Well,
like what was the most in between? What, 18 days? Today?
I have 20 days today.
You have 20? How am I losing track, dude? Okay. So your first day to 20.
Yeah. What
was the most anxious thing, and how did you get past that?
Well, obviously, a lack of substances has certain effects on your body, especially when you have an addiction. Right? There are symptoms that you experience. I learned the term from you, PAWS, PAWS, post-acute withdrawal symptom. Right? Syndrome.
You're good, dude.
I keep getting that wrong.
Yeah, it's all right.
I think first I said post-addiction withdrawal.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. I'll get it one of these days.
Yeah, eventually.
Anyways, PAWS. But so you're gonna have certain things happen. But honestly, the most anxious that I felt from day 1 to day 20, which is today, I think it's still that right before that first AA meeting I went to. I didn't know what to expect. There was a lot of people there in a small room. It was a new experience for me. I was dealing with I was new to the symptoms, I was new to recovery, new to withdrawals, new to I'd never been to a meeting before. And that's a recipe for anxiety.
Right.
Just all a compiling amount of events. I did a little bit of breathing stuff, and I still felt kind of anxious on it. But it wasn't until I got inside the meeting and actually was like part of it that I started to calm down, because I realized that, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, is that one thing that happens with anxiety is that a lot of us are chronic overthinkers.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah. I never turn it off.
I never turn it off. It helps in some aspects, but it hurts in a lot of aspects. You know. And so I had all these ideas about what AA was. I had all these ideas about what was going to happens in the meetings and what they were going to talk about. And I thought that I was going to have to share my feelings in front of a bunch of old farts talking about Jesus. And that's not how it is. You know, that's not what AA is. There's some old farts in there, but they're cool.
Yeah, they're super cool.
They're
super cool and knowledgeable.
But I found myself in a room of people who had experienced the same things as me, if not similar, you know. And I found myself in a room full of people who were understanding, who didn't judge me, you know, which is one thing I was afraid of, you know. I like to think that I'm not afraid of that, but I am, or I was in that situation at least, you know. And it was such a welcoming, accepting, like I went in there and I was fucking shaking and shit, and I was like these motherfuckers are probably like, oh, this tweaker, you know.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately,
no, they walked up to me, they shook my hand, they said, "I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Here's my number if you ever want to talk." That was my experience, man. And I went in there anxious as fuck, and I left there feeling calmer and steadier than I had going in. Here's why. It was an extremely positive experience. Extremely positive. Anybody who may have apprehensions about meetings, even just for frame of reference, I had an apprehension. My apprehension was that it's called Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Well, I was coming off of methamphetamines. You know, I was like, why don't I go to NA? You know, but it's an addiction, right? Alcoholism is an addiction. You know, opioids is an addiction. Methamphetamine is addiction. It's all the same disease, and the program works. And it works for people like me. It works for people who maybe didn't have a drug problem, but have an alcohol problem. Like, it works. That structure works. And in case you didn't know, NA's program is structured from the AA program. That is the skeletal structure for most recovery programs. Mm-hmm. And that's why they took from it, is because it fucking works. But anyone with apprehensions about that, I would say just give it one meeting. Just try it out. Just go see what it's about. You know.
And not
hopefully it turns into 2 meetings and 3 meetings. You know, I'm not saying that like one and done, but if you like it, cool. If not, go check out an NA meeting.
Definitely shop around as well. There's so many. Not only are there so many different types of AA and NA, like, you know, meetings. There's young people's, there's men's meetings, women's meetings, you know, book studies and stuff like that.
There's a music meeting.
There's music meetings, you know, music meditations and stuff like that. But also there's smart recovery. There's celebrate recovery. You know, there is Dharma recovery, refuge recovery.
A lot of options on the menu.
There's no cookie cutter way when it comes to recovery to just completely cure your addiction. You know, you not only have, you know, do I feel like this is me, I'm not telling anyone what to do. I just feel like, you know, it's helpful to have one of these programs, because then you get out, you meet people, and you build a support system that you can rely on, you know, when you're struggling that day. You know, and the thing is that you know, as Grim mentioned, it's not just a one and done type deal. You know, you have to consistently go. You know, so it's important to me for me to have a home group and attend that home group whenever I can, as well as, you know, if I got some free time and I need a little recovery in my soul, then I'll just attend a meeting. You know, I'll get one in, and that makes me solidified in my recovery that nothing's going to happen today.
I also want to mention to you that there's not really a wrong way. There's a right way for you to go about these meetings, right? Mm-hmm. So, the only requirement is that you have a desire to stop drinking or using, right? So you can have more than one home group. You can have more than one sponsor if you get a sponsor. You can go to 1 meeting, you can go to 7 meetings. You know, it's whatever works for you in that structure is gonna be encouraged, right? But I wanted to bring up, or unless you want to bring up, there's also the DRA.
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah. And you know, that's something that's definitely catered to, you know, something like this podcast. You know, if you're here just for mental disorders, that's awesome. If you're here just for recovery, that's awesome. But those of us that have mental disorders and also an addiction, there's such thing as dual recovery, where it discusses, you know, how mental health ties into your addiction and mental disorders, and ways that you can, you know, coping skills and stuff like that. And also it creates an area for other people who have both mental health disorders and addictions come together and meet, you know, and feel safe, you know. And that's the thing about all of these 12-step and so on, these type of programs, is that they're designed to make you feel safe and welcomed. And if somebody is not making you feel welcome, which there are definitely, you know, some shitheads in there, but
it's not the standard, but they do exist, and they do attend some of these meetings.
yeah, I mean, we see them every other meeting that we go to, and it sucks because sometimes it scares the newcomer away, and that's the most important person in the meeting. So, you know, the way I see it is keep going. You know, find one that the people find your people. You know, and that doesn't necessarily have to be people in your age group or your music group or your style. You know, find people that you connect with, and that's you know, the opposite of addiction is connection, for sure. And
one of my favorite dudes in AA is old enough to be my grandfather.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he's an amazing man who always has something insightful to say to us, you know, and we appreciate all of his wisdom. And when he speaks, we take the cotton out of our ears and put it in our mouth and we listen, you know, just because there's always something to gain from someone. You know, there may be a point of view that you have never, you know, thought about before. But honestly, I'm going to stop myself there. We need to get back on topic. We kind of went totally recovery. So let's get back to, you know, the topic at hand. You know, how does, you know, let's go back to the question. So,
relevant,
you know, it's definitely relevant, 100%. But I do want to get back for the rest of the episode, you know, talking specifically about anxiety. You know, or myself, I also, one of the most anxious moments was the first time I went to a 12-step program, and you know, it was nerve-wracking because everything that I've seen on TV and film is like, you know, a group of like 10 people sitting in a circle,
in like a gym somewhere,
right? You know, something like that in a quiet room where, you know, when I went to my first AA and NA meetings, it was a giant room, and there were, you know, easily like 50 people in the first AA meeting I went to, and then easily like 100 people in the first NA meeting I went to. So I walked in and was just like, nope, can't do this. Nope, not happening. And I you know, I mustered up the courage and was like, you know what, no, we're doing this. Not to mention I had to because I was in a program. You know, luckily, you know, the house manager of the program that I was in made us sit in the back where, you know, it's a little bit more, you know, people won't call on you as much. You don't have to speak as much. You know, you don't have to participate as much. You know, you can just kind of sit back and just listen.
You don't have to participate at all if you're too anxious to either. If somebody calls on you, you're more than welcome to pass. You don't have to.
Absolutely. You know, you gotta just do what makes you comfortable, but at the same time, you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You know, big part of recovery and dealing with your mental health disorders is pushing. You know, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a lot, because what's comfortable to us will lead us back to our addictions, and it'll make us backslide as far as our mental health. You know, I'm a firm believer that every day you have to be 1% better than you were yesterday. And not only does that mean just like, hey, you know, telling somebody that you like their outfit for the day or something like that. It also means, you know, push yourself in your recovery, push yourself with your mental health disorders. You know, if you are an anxious person, maybe saying hi to a stranger will help you get more comfortable in the long run. You know, just I've got a friend that, you know, we go on walks and I make him say hi to random people, and it slowly but surely has gotten him comfortable with walking down the street, you know, which he has a lot of anxiety about. So, you got something, brother?
I was just gonna say, one, I agree with you. I think even like growth happens in your outside your comfort zone, right? That's where growth happens. Growth is uncomfortable. Progress is uncomfortable. You know, there's a level of uncomfortability that we are comfortable with,
right?
You know, but I do think that's good advice. Also, I do want to mention, you know, not every meeting is 50 to 100 people either. I've been to a meeting where there's literally been 3 to 5 people.
For sure,
know?
For sure.
So find the one that works for you there. don't think that they're all going to be these assemblies either. The time that you go also affects that.
Yeah, and one thing that I make myself do, even though I don't want to, I want to sit in the back and I want to be quiet, or at least I used to. Now that I've become more comfortable in the rooms,
you made me sit in the front.
I did make you sit in the front because
I'm very glad you did.
No, because it made you get comfortable quicker.
Dude, I started sharing like the second meeting.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I was already up there, and I was like, you know what, these people are bringing value to my life by sharing their stories. Maybe even though I'm only a couple days in, maybe I say something that might bring something. And I've had people come up to me and be like, thank you so much for your share. Like, I got so much out of that. And I was like, I don't know what you got out of it, but you're welcome.
I always get something out of your shares, man.
Feeling.
Like, I appreciate, every time you speak, because, like, you're my brother, and, it not only brings insight to me, but I feel like it makes us closer because we get to know each other more and more, and builds us a tighter bond.
Oh, for sure. Especially since we're doing this together.
Right.
It's something that for reference, we always go to meetings together.
Right.
I mean, we're always together anyway. We hang out all the time.
Yeah.
But it helps when you got a buddy system.
It does.
You have your recovery buddy. You have your anxiety buddy. You have just your homie around, somebody you're comfortable with.
Oh, yeah.
It does help. That actually is another anxiety trick.
Yeah, like have somebody around you that you feel completely comfortable with, and have a safe word. It doesn't hurt having a safe word. Be like, hey man, my personal safe word for a lot of stuff is Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Like if I'm getting too upset around a friend, they know to use Beetlejuice to be like, hey Steve, you need to go take 5 and chill out. And I'm like, yep, you're right, I'll be back. Grim has one when he feels like people are talking over him. He uses Beetlejuice, and then the group stops and acknowledges and lets him have the floor.
It's a source of anxiety for me.
Absolutely, and so we don't want that. So personally, in our friend group or our pack, we have these kind of safety precautions in place. That way we can save each other, because the last thing we need is for our brothers to backslide or backtrack, or I'm sorry, I said brothers, but also our sisters, man. We have tons of sisters in the rooms and in recovery. I run into them, brothers and sisters on a daily basis, and I check in and stuff like that, and a lot of what they have to tell me is that anxiety is playing a big part into why they stopped going to AA or NA or something like that. It just wasn't a good fit for them, or they didn't feel comfortable and stuff like that. So like, we try to create a safe space and an ambiance where you don't have to be anxious, you don't have to be worried, you don't have to be uncomfortable around us. Like, we will protect your secrets, for life.
Well, the last thing I want is to be the reason that somebody has an anxiety attack. So
Absolutely.
The last thing I want is to be the reason that someone stopped going into or stopped doing something that worked in their recovery. Because I don't want that either. So like, all of us, dude, we have this open communication, and we have, like you said, precautions in place. Like, if I feel like I'm getting anxious because I've been cut off, so a couple of times, I'll just say Beetlejuice, it works. But like, whatever your safe word is, it's just a suggestion. But we are running out of time.
We are, and we're gonna wrap this up here in a second. I do want to say one last thing. The reason that my safe word is Beetlejuice is because if you have to say it 3 times, it's too many. So anyway, we really appreciate y'all watching this and sticking with us this far. If you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate. Again, we're Symbiotic. We unfortunately don't have our other co-host Shadow with us this time. Hopefully he'll be with us next time. But hey, we all live busy lives. So this is Friendly Neighborhood Steve signing off, and it's about enough out of me.
And I'm Grim. Just make sure you follow us on all platforms as well. Same handle. But we'll see you next time, and we love you.
Love you.